Howdy, doobers and footers. Like my hat? Well, I think I'm going to keep this little look going on for my story times. Hopefully, you don't mind it. So, I had a hard time leaving Walter where I left him. And so, um, after I left the live stream, after finishing my story on Halloween, it started bothering me. And I put pen to paper once again. So I sat down and I began writing. Okay. And this was kind of where I left off, you know. And so I started here and I kept going. And as I write, I kind of let the story tell itself. And it just kept taking turn after turn after turn after turn. And before I knew it, I was somewhere way far out from where I had wanted to be. And so all of this, and I always write by hand. Like all of my stories, I write by hand. There's just something about putting pen to paper that I just have always enjoyed. And so I stopped where I was and then began again. A little bit frustrated and was like, no, this was not the story. And it's funny because as I write stories, sometimes like characters take on a personality and I kind of like can't get that out of my head. And that was the case with Walter. He was like, don't leave me hanging here. And so if you didn't catch Halloween's story time, well, it's out there for you to catch. It's kind of like a twofold. There's an unboxing with it. Maybe I'll put the two together. I don't know. But at this point, I'm just going to go and carry on where I left off. Now, I wrote another story since I finished Walter's little um, situation, Walter and Betsy. But um, that one's a little bit more silly and fun on the other spectrum. I usually like to write scary, spiritual stories, things like that, things of redemption, stuff like that. So I have just journals and journals and journals of stories that I've written. And it's funny because the last story I wrote, it's a really short story. And one of the problems that I've always had, and all of my creative writing teachers have struggled this with me, is first and third person. So if I'm writing a story in first person, it will go to third person and then back to first and the third. And so it gets kind of out of hand. So that's where that story is. So I don't know if I will read that. But all of these are first drafts. So um, keep that in mind. There's no editing done, um, if at all. Like there's editing while I'm writing, but for the most part, there's no editing. So this one, I began with Raven Song and then I changed it to Raven Dance. So that is the continuation of this story. So bear with me, tubers and footers. We'll snuggle up, settle in, get your tea, get your snacks, get ready for some story time. All right, here we go. This is Raven Song. Okay. Out of all the birds of flight, there is one who soars apart from the rest of the avian collective as cunning, wise, mysterious, and dastardly, the raven. Few humans have the honor of gaining the trust or the rare blessing of a loyal friendship of a raven. They do not forget a face and somehow maintain a form of communication that is otherworldly. If you are one of the unlucky to have angered, pestered, or worse yet, hurt a raven, escaping the wrath and vengeance will seem utterly impossible. Moving to different continents will not even provide respite from the winged darkness. The gifts and surprises left by a raven showcase their insight and perception when a friendship is formed. The constant, torturous reminders will become obvious if one has created a soul seeker as an enemy. Shitting on your car is the least of worries. Walter had bonded with a raven after his wife Betsy's passing. They were exchanging gifts, conversation, and time as any other friendship. As they shared lunch together, Walter could see his reflection in the dark eyes of his raven companion. The wild bond helped Walter escape the depressive monotony of his life. One evening, as he watched the sun make its way beyond the horizon, the rocking chair Betsy enjoyed began to rock. The evening air was still. The chair just rocked, the same rhythm as Betsy would. Walter stared in disbelief, trying to find any answer than the possibility that rocked before him. Curiously, he tried to sit in the chair, only to find it to stop. That evening he had a vivid dream of Betsy. She was trying to show him something. He tried to comprehend what she was trying to say, but he couldn't understand her. His trusty winged friend shown up for lunch. Walter was excited to share his evening events as he began to spill out in a rushed bliss, which seemed to startle the raven. The raven hopped about, flapping wildly. It let out a long yet clear "no" to Walter. Silenced by his winged friend, he watched closely. "Did you just say no?" The raven held his gaze on Walter, remained still and silent. Surprised and bewildered, he wasn't sure what his raven friend was rejecting. The wind whipped up, pushing everything about. Walter had to go tend to his livestock and equipment. Again that evening, Walter waited on the porch, hoping for a repeat. He was left waiting. Hoping for a visit in his dreams, he awoke after a restful night's sleep, a bit dejected. The days passed without incident, and just as he gave up, the rocking chair rocked. Excited, Walter repeated his motions and sat in the chair, and as he slept that night, he was visited by Betsy again. She continued to try to speak to him. This entire scenario repeated itself enough times that Walter was able to establish communication, and soon enough he was being instructed by Betsy on how they could be together again. "Hey, B.O.B. Jake, how's it going? Hey, Mike." The Dollar Merchant Store of Elvira. Yes. You like it? This is my story time outfit. Okay, back to the story. The day of the ritual was approaching, and Walter failed to notice his winged friend hadn't come by in quite some time. He had become consumed with his latest project. The guilt Walter carried drove him to complete these tasks without hesitation. He knew he had to make things right. He had no recollection of how exactly Betsy had passed, but knew he was to blame. As every time before, whenever he had any altercation with Betsy, he never remembered any of it. He would awaken in a groggy stupor and find himself amongst the rubble, and Betsy scared, timid, and tending to wounds. Confused, every time Walter would apologize and beg for forgiveness, swearing he would never hurt her again. Walter didn't consume alcohol, drugs, or anything that would be an obvious cause of blackouts. He felt ashamed and would keep to himself, avoiding Betsy out of concern, only to find himself in the same predicament time after time. Betsy would say she'd try to escape. She would cry and recall to Walter horrific things he couldn't imagine committing, especially on his precious Betsy. He offered to send her away, which she refused, claiming she would help him through it. Together, she could fix him. Walter even locked himself in the barn, only to find himself groggy and amongst rubble once again. Confused, desperate, and concerned, Walter reached out to his brother for help. The last he knew, his brother had run off with the circus. It was a fleeting attempt, but he had hoped for the best. When Darrell showed up, it was as if he had never left. They were instantly bonded and enjoyed one another's company. Walter felt it odd that for some unforeseen turn of events, Betsy and Darrell had known of one another already. They never elaborated on how well they knew one another, but it was clear there was history between them. His long-lost raven came to mind as Walter was recalling the events that brought him here, now communicating with the dead. He wondered where he had been lately. Walter was dragging the last item into place. The only thing left was to wait for Halloween, All Hallows Eve. He was nervous, yet hopeful it would all work out, and Betsy would be returned to him. He could forgive her for what she had done with Darrell. He just wanted to make it all right again. The familiar sound of wings alerted Walter his friend had arrived. No. Again, it seemed to demand. There you are. Tomorrow night will be the night. You should come and see for yourself. Walter was almost giddy. No, the raven insisted and flew to a rung high in the rafters of the barn. It's gonna work, Walter insisted. Betsy stood in the crisp autumn air, still embraced by Darrell. Her body tingled as she regained her physical presence. We did it, she announced aloud. Darrell lifted her and spun her around. It's all ours. They laughed together as they took one long last look at Walter, trapped, as the portal slowly closed in. They embraced and enjoyed a long kiss as the final stages of the portal closed. The distinct caw of a raven pierced the moment, and it flew with determination into the closing portal. Betsy and Darrell stood in silence, unsure of what they just witnessed. Darrell quickly turned away, facing the farmhouse. This is going to sell quickly and worth a fortune. Once we split our profits 50-50, we can go our separate ways, just as promised. Darrell was overjoyed at how well everything went. Betsy, your acting is superb. He believed every bit of it. They continued to compliment one another on a job well done as they walked into the farmhouse together. Thank you, lover, Betsy laughed. If we can make that believable, we can con the world. They laughed so uncontrollably they had to lean on the hallway for composure. Walter was now lost in a void. Time had no relevance. He just remained locked in shock. The insistent flapping seemed to awake him from the trance-like state. There it was, the raven. No, it insisted, as if saying, I told you so. I didn't listen to you. Now I'm lost forever. Walter was so melancholy he had given up entirely already. He was a broken man. I deserve it. No, the raven demanded. The raven flew closer as if having to fly through sludge. Everything was different. Walter remained held in place. The air was heavy. Motion was strained. There didn't seem to be any substance to the space. There was nothing of distinguishing traits. It was just empty. Nowhere to go. Listen to me, Walter, the raven spoke. You have a small chance to escape this place. We must move now. The raven pressed forward into the emptiness. Walter followed, fully trusting his mysterious friend. It felt as if they hadn't made any progress whatsoever when the raven announced, "We're here." Confused, Walter looked about, seeing nothing. The warmth, that was what he noticed first. The soothing, soft aroma of lavender, vanilla, and a plethora of other fragrances pleasing to the core quickly enveloped them. The feeling of love surrounded Walter. Soon he was in the presence of a pure energy that emitted an unconditional love he had never known. See the truth, Walter. It is not as you know it to be. There were words without a voice, yet a presence that commanded respect, and Walter, still consumed with guilt, shame, and heartbreak, was dealing with the confliction of emotions he was experiencing. Let it go, Walter. With that, Walter released all the burdens he carried upon his soul, pouring out pent-up emotions simultaneously. The release was unlike any joy he had ever known. He was still holding tight to his guilt when it was all revealed to him. The abuse had never taken place. The burden of guilt he carried wasn't his to bear. Betsy had drugged him at his meals and would stage the abuse, convincing Walter he had been a monster. The overwhelming shock of betrayal he felt would have killed him had he not been surrounded in a state of bliss. The truth continued to flood him. The entire love affair was an act to push him to the edge. They staged the entire events. Betsy hadn't been killed. It was all smoke and mirrors, plus lots of drugs. This is all in your imagination, Walter. Your body is in a coma. Confusion clouded his mind. He grasped for what was real and what was a dream. Wake up, the raven insisted. Walter, wake up. Walter struggled with blinding confusion. Who or what was real? It was like a funnel of information was being force-fed to Walter. Was the farm real? Betsy? His brother? He was spiraling into a blur of confusion. Walter, focus! Betsy drugged you, faked it all. Your brother is going to sell the farm. They are not lovers. They are con men. It all landed. Now wake up! The raven insisted. Watch me. It began strutting from side to side, bobbing up and down, small flaps of its wings. The peculiarity of the dancing raven before him sent Walter into a peaceful slumber. The taste of dust is the first sensation Walter felt before the rest came flooding in. The darkness enveloped him for so long. The glaring sun was shocking. He rolled over, his stiff and aching body gasping for air, spitting out the dirt and grit that had accumulated in his gaping open mouth. Struggling to move, he was unsure of how long he had been left for dead. His cracked lips indicated much longer than hours. A raven landed beside him, dropping a sprig with berries on it. Thank you, friend, Walter smiled. I'm glad you weren't a dream. The raven seemed to laugh at the notion, then quickly flew away. Walter tried to move his stiff limbs more and more, pushing into the pain. The berries helped, but he required water. The distant caw indicated his friend was still nearby. Walter managed the strength to sit up. He was able to survey more of his surroundings. He had walked every bit of his family farm and quickly understood where he had been dumped like a carcass. He remained a bit foggy and confused, but knew he had best be careful. He worked his way to the water trough. It was meant for animals, but Walter had designed a spigot for human use. Each of his watering holes he had placed with wells he drilled by hand. Walter spent his life building up and working the land. The family has been on the land prior to the country being fully founded. They had roots in the land. Darrell knew the value of the land it held and tried to get his parents to sell, to the point of non-stop contention and their father refusing to will him any of the land for fear of losing it. This was why he felt compelled to join the circus. That was how he met Betsy. They became quite the duo. They were notorious and why Betsy showed up on Walter's doorstep to begin with. They had played Walter from the start. He confused a damsel in distress for the love of his life. Now he had to carefully plan his vengeance. For this, he knew exactly the one to include. Darrell had debts well overdue with the wrong people. For Betsy, he wanted to devise something more intimate. They needed to feel comfortable. Walter worked his way to his small hunting and trapper cabin on the farthest edge of his property. This was another addition of Walter's Darrell had no idea existed. Walter could stage his return from here while keeping a close eye on Darrell and Betsy. A month had passed, and all of Walter's efforts were about to be revealed. Darrell and Betsy were prepared to sign over the farm, with deals of their own waiting for the payday. Betsy had a club she was on the final stages to purchase. Darrell had an island in the South Pacific to escape to. Cash in hand, he planned. The paperwork was drawn up. The day to sign arrived. They planned a celebration at the club Betsy was purchasing the same day. All was set. Hey, Pearls. Hey, Uncle Bones. As the champagne flowed freely, the food and entertainment spectacular, Darrell and Betsy toasted to one another's success. We have a surprise planned for this evening, one time only. The lights dimmed, and an excited hush fell upon the crowd. Betsy and Darrell looked to one another for answers, only to be intrigued by excitement and the element of surprise. The Dance of the Raven was announced, and the room fell dark. Betsy and Darrell found seats, quite enchanted by the ambiance and allure of the unknown. A faint light illuminated a slender, dark-haired vixen, just enough to make out the curves and shine of leather snug on the areas of interest. The loud, familiar sound of wings spreading revealed a magnificent costume adorned with wings that expanded beyond 8 feet in height. Truly glorious to behold. The woman began to move with grace and charm as the music, low, chanting, lulling Darrell and Betsy into a trance like a state as their bodies swayed slowly to the rhythm. The more the woman swayed and moved, the less Darrell and Betsy could see. As they rubbed their blurry eyes, the dancer transformed before them. A majestic raven flew about, astonishing Betsy and Darrell. as they remained transfixed on the woman, now Raven. Their vision seemed to phase in and out, while geometric shapes began appearing. Soon, a familiar voice resonated through the room. "Enjoying the show?" Walter asked over the sound system. The familiar reality of what was proceeding to take place induced a fear completely foreign to them until now. As the drugs consumed more and more of their neurons, Walter ensured to inform them of what awaited them in their soon-to-be coma states of mind. Unable to respond by any means, they fell further into the trance-like state of mush, just aware enough to understand what is happening, feel pain, just not be able to react or respond. Carmine entered the room, and both Betsy and Darrell knew their prison was going to be a hell. "It has been a pleasure doing business with you." Carmine shook Walter's hand. "I was over the moon when I heard you had the gift of Darrell, the rat-fink bastard, but to learn you had Betsy as well. Oh, I hit the jackpot." He laughed. "Am I right, fellas?" His entourage unanimously agreed. "I think she got every one of my guys while playing me." "Oh, Betsy, baby, do I have some fun lined up for you. I hear you like to pretend you've been beat up, abused, mistreated." Ha! He laughed a sinister laugh that chilled Walter to the core. Whatever Walter endured, he realized he was way down on a long list of her victims she had played. Not everyone finds justified closure, but Walter. His sunrises and sunsets have even more color nowadays as he watches the ravens dance in the sky to and from their nesting sites, always leaving a shiny new bead, tiny mirror, rings, or whatever sparkly thing he finds for his winged mysterious friends who can traverse the realms to retrieve lost souls or bring messages to those with ears to hear, eyes to see the dance of the raven. There you go, tubers and footers. We couldn't leave poor Walter just hanging there. "Hey, Barry, how's it going?" So on Halloween, I wrote a story for Halloween. And then it's kind of like a quick short story. And then that evening, it just kind of sat with me. And was like, I can't just leave it there. Thank you, girls. Thank you. So Walter nagged at me all night long. So away I scribbled. I've always loved to just write my stories, pen to paper, and it's just kind of fun. I have this other one, like I said, that I wrote, and it's a really short story. It's really silly. It's called The Beast Inside, and it's kind of making fun of a situation currently going on in the Bigfoot community. Poking a little fun at it. So yeah, that's something I like to do, write little stories, things like that. So hopefully I'll be able to share more of that. I probably think this might be my hat to use for story time. Kind of like it. Kind of like the look. It's actually backwards, so. But you know me and my hats. So this one seemed fitting. Put a southern drawl in it. You've got the southern drawl, Miss Pearls. Yeah. Anyhow, yeah, so it's fun to just write some stories. So hopefully you're enjoying them. I'll try and do more of these as I write them. Come across journals with stories written that I think you might like. We could make it a thing. Oh, and I have some Iron Dog announcements to make soon, too. So we've got a lot coming up. Hopefully I can pull it all together for y'alls. And we can make another awesome Iron Dog race here in the mix. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. Tubers and footers. It'll be fun. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed the story. Like I said, the first part of it was on Halloween, and then this was kind of the second part. So, I don't know. Do you think I should read them both together? Let me know. I'll try and do that. But, that's where we're at. All right. Thanks, Pearls. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. Hope you guys are having an awesome Friday. The guys went out surfing. So they're out. They took the motor home. They met up with some of their friends, and they're gonna go have a surfing weekend out there. Captain Jake, has accepted to go on a tug, so he will be hauling in a tug from Seattle to Hawaii and back again in December. So he'll be gone for a whole month in December. So we got lots coming up, tubers and footers, lots coming up. So I will keep y'all posted. And and I got some stuff to show you in the living room. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for shorts and stuff like that come up. All right, I love you, tubers and footers. We'll see y'all soon. Take care. Have a good night.